Who says you can't go home? One Bear just proved you absolutely can, and we're going to talk about his return to Waco via the transfer portal here on Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by Monopoly Go. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. Some surprising news yesterday out of the transfer portal. It's not often that a guy leaves, goes to another school, and eventually comes back. It's very, very rare, but that is the position that one Baylor defensive back finds himself in. Also, a lot of rumors about VJ Edgecombe, that he might be on the move now that Alvin Brooks is out of Waco. We'll talk about that a little bit too. And expansion is always on our minds. And one former Baylor coach actually talked about this at the end of last week and how that could affect the Big 12 and therefore, of course, Baylor as well. But big news out of the transfer portal yesterday. In fact, the only way I can really accurately describe it for my Baylor crowd is like this. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Of course, that is Luke chapter 15, verse 31. The prodigal son returning. Lorando Snaxx Johnson announces on Twitter yesterday he is coming back. He left after the 2022 season, transferred to Arkansas, actually had a pretty productive year there with the Hogs in the SEC, and now is riding out probably his last year of eligibility here to come back to Waco and play for Baylor, where it all started. The tweet was, I was tripping, gang. My bad. I'm back, though. Hashtag Sick'em. P.S. in all caps, I love you, Coach Aranda. Okay. All right. Is it a huge position of need for Baylor defensive back? No. In fact, it's one of the positions they absolutely don't need help in, but help is welcome. Snaxx was a guy who had started some games in 2022. It was one that I really hated to see him go in the portal. In fact, after that season, I was like, man, that looked like a future foundational piece of your defense. You know, wasn't putting up massive numbers, not even great numbers yet at Baylor, but he was someone who you could see there was a lot of confidence in him from the coaching staff, and looked like a guy who was going to be in your starting 11 defensively for a couple of years to come. And instead, he goes to Arkansas. There's some controversy around him leaving. He goes to Arkansas and has, like I said, a productive year for the Hogs. In fact, he sets his career high in tackles for loss, pass breakups, had a sack, had a pick, which he never had at Baylor. And so this is a guy who was playing his best football last year before entering in the transfer portal, and now comes back as again the kind of the prodigal son here. He did play some nickel for Arkansas last year, which we saw a bit of in his redshirt sophomore season, which was 2022 at Baylor. And I guess the good news is you just get stronger at that position. You know, it wasn't a position of need, but you do get stronger there. The defensive backfield is in a good spot with the Jenkins brothers and Kendrick Simpkins at safety, Carl Williams and DJ Coleman and all these guys. There's a good young core there, and to bring in a guy who is going to start and obviously bring, you know, a lot of starts under his belt with him. This is a guy that started 24 games in the last 2 years in the regular season anyway. So that's 24 for 24. He's a guy who brings a good amount of talent, of course, but also a leadership with him, and hopefully, you know, some edge with him. Because I'll say this, you know, we're not really longing for Ron Roberts defenses, even though, I mean, last year was just a a mess in Matt Powledge's first season, but there was an edge to these guys that we did not see on the defensive side or the offensive side in 2023. And Snaxx is part of that group. Snaxx is part of that group that was guys who did play with the chip on their shoulder, who probably didn't mind having a coach who yelled a little bit. I know that was the big deal with Ron Roberts. He yelled at the players, but is certainly a Dave Aranda guy. And if you can bring in someone who has the talent and who's going to plug in and start right away and is also, really in your head coach's corner and in a time where there aren't a lot of people outside of the locker room in your coach's corner, that's a good sign. That is a good sign for the program and for this iteration of it, the 2024 team. So very happy to see Snaxx Johnson back with the Bears. He was someone I thought was going to be, again, a foundational piece. And I think the bigger picture here is it's wild to see a guy. It's tough enough to see a guy go in the portal, and they always say, that might be. It's just to check out my options. I might even come back here. It very rarely happens that a guy pulls his name out of the portal and stays at his school. And I would venture to guess it's even more rare to see a guy leave in the portal, go somewhere else for a year, and then come back in the portal. I don't, follow other teams to the nth degree, but I have never seen it. I have not seen it where a guy goes in the portal, goes somewhere else, plays somewhere else. And in this case, let's be honest, a better place in terms of, Arkansas didn't have a great year by any means, but, you're playing in the SEC and you're getting a lot of exposure and you're playing for a team that was better than Baylor and to then come back. I have never seen that. But this is exactly the scenario you have. And I think it might go to show. I actually said this on Locked On Big 12 with Drake Toll, of which I will have a cut from the Locked On Big 12 show later, but not this one. I went to say, the transfer portal is crazy and we all want some regulations on it. And I don't know that we're going to get that before the free market takes over. And what I mean by that is I think you are going to start to see players realizing that the grass is not always greener on the other side. What the old folks have been telling them for a couple of years now is going to ring true. And I think that is going to make for numbers going into the portal dissipating maybe just a little bit in the next couple of years because guys are more hesitant to do so. And you might start to see some more Snaxx Johnsons, guys who do end up going another place and then hightailing it back because they liked the situation that they were in before. And you can't say this didn't work out for Snaxx. Again, had a good year. I don't know what things were like behind the scenes. Both programs, it's kind of a hot seat for the head coach with Sam Pittman in Arkansas, Dave Aranda here at Baylor, but he decided this is where I want to be. He loves Coach Aranda, and I'm telling you, this guy is going to come in and he is going to be a starter for you in that defensive backfield. So welcome back, Snaxx. All right, but first things first, before we get back into this, okay, I'm just going to call timeout, game off here, okay? We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in the game, y'all. And Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. So the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, okay? You can get the unique stickers that you could trade with friends, complete albums that comes with big prizes. You got cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends, the other friends, when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton, including their own mini games like digging for treasure or robot pachinko game. There's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or on the App Store. All right, game on. We are back. Big rumors over the last couple of days. And this is rumors coming from fan bases over the last couple of days. And there's something to be said about this. So obviously, Alvin Brooks III at the end of last week, Baylor's co-associate head coach last year, takes the same job, associate head coach alone at Kentucky on Mark Pope's staff. And between Brooks and obviously John Jacobs, who left the staff earlier in the offseason, there has been a lot of talk of, are guys going to follow them? Because these are the two main recruiters. Alvin Brooks III has brought in some of the best players in the country the last couple of years. Keyonte George, Jacoby Walter, and VJ Edgecombe, the number 3 prospect in the 2024 class, arguably the best recruit Baylor has ever gotten, recruited by Alvin Brooks. And the two teams he turned down, 2 programs he turned down to say yes to Baylor, were Duke and, you guessed it, Kentucky. So that's tough, man. Like, that's the red flags have to be raised there. But I know Kentucky fans are really excited about potentially getting another crack at VJ Edgecombe. I'm here to tell you that's not going to happen. VJ Edgecombe's going to play for Baylor next year. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm confident in that. First one comes from Friday's show with Ted Emmerich. If you haven't listened to it, it is a great listen. He gives you a full rundown on VJ and Rob Wright, how they're going to fit into this program. And one thing he said, he was the play-by-play guy when VJ made that commitment live on ESPN at the Hoop Hall Classic back a couple months ago. And he said he was talking to VJ before, and VJ told him he was ready to make the decision to come to Baylor right after his visit. It was a couple months later, obviously, that he made it official, but he was like, I was sold right then and there. He was sold on Scott Drew, and he was sold on the program, not only for what it could do for him as a player, but for him as a person, which are all the buzzwords we love to hear, right? And then he does things that back it up, right? Obviously, I mean, Baylor has been a great guard producer the last couple of years, and you also hear these stories about VJ donating his NIL money to his school in the Bahamas where he started out. And, you know, the fact that he moved to the U.S. when he was 14 in order to get a college scholarship, went out into the wild blue yonder, went off on his own to an unknown place so that he can provide for his family down the line and get a free ride to go to college. And so that tells me this is more than basketball for VJ. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, Baylor's the only place that's doing good things. Of course not. But it means it's more than basketball. And what is the one thing that Kentucky and Duke could beat Baylor in 10 times out of 10? Basketball pedigree, right? The history, the tradition. Baylor doesn't have that yet. It's got a pretty good thing going right now, I'll tell you that. And it's got a national championship, which is what we care about, but it doesn't have all those things. So if you took a sports nerd that was also pretty good at basketball and gave them those 3 schools, chances are they're probably picking Duke or Kentucky. But when it's not just about basketball for you, and it's about family, and it's about serving, then Baylor has an upper hand. And again, Ted was very adamant about that. VJ fell in love with all of it. I'm sure he loved being guided by Alvin Brooks III, of course, but it was all of it, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing, as I look at it from the coach's point of view, okay? Scott Drew has the best coaching tree of any active head coach in college basketball right now, right? He does. He's got guys in the Big 12, obviously with McCaslin and Tang and John Jacobs, and now Alvin Brooks, the second man at one of the top programs. Paul Mills as well. Matthew Driscoll at North Florida. He's a Baylor guy. And through all of that, do you know how many times a coach left Scott Drew's staff and took players with him to his next stop? I'll give you a minute here. Yeah, make sure PEMDAS, carry the one. Yep. Oh, yeah, it's 0. Not a single one. That has never happened. It wasn't until like the transfer portal became a thing that Scott Drew had like his second guy ever transfer out of the program. So it does not happen. Guys don't want to leave Baylor, and former Baylor coaches don't want to raid their old cabinets. They don't do it. And you look at Kentucky, I mean, a lot of people thought, oh, here come a bunch of BYU Cougars to come here to play for UK. That hadn't been the case either. So it might not be Mark Pope's MO either. I might be wrong. I might be naive on this, but I don't think Alvin Brooks, as soon as he got the job, was banging down the door in Long Island to try and get VJ Edgecombe to come aboard with him. Don't think that was the case. And I'm pretty confident in this one. You know, you tried taking the head coach. You did get the assistant coach. It was a good win, but I don't think you're getting the star player too. And VJ is going to be obviously a humongous piece of what Baylor is trying to do next year. And obviously can't wait for it. Everyone just says the explosiveness. You know, think Russell Westbrook type explosiveness. I'm not saying he could be an NBA Hall of Famer, but that's the kind of dude we're talking about. And that is a fantastic spot. And give credit to Scott Drew and his staff over the last couple of years. You know, VJ Edgecombe famously picked Baylor over Duke and Kentucky, sure. But these other guys they brought in, they had options. You know, I'm talking about a Keyonte George. I'm talking about a Jacoby Walter, an Eve Meese, a Kendall Brown, and going even farther back with an Isaiah Austin. These guys had options. Ones that had more banners, more fans in the stands than Baylor. More Final Fours, more Elite Eights, all of that stuff. Flashier uniforms, more guys in the pros. But those guys stuck with Baylor. And Scott Drew has clearly, I mean, this is no surprise. He's built something. This is not foreign to any one of us. But he has built something that transcends just the basketball in the recruiting annals. And that might sound confusing, but that is super impressive that he is able to recruit one and done guys to a program like Baylor. Because again, so much of that sell for these guys who are also looking at Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas, Gonzaga, even UConn, these kind of blue blood programs, that Baylor is able to still get them to come here, even though they know they're playing for 1 year. You know, and it's just not always about how many championships you've won in the past or how many top 10 guys you've had in the past. Baylor can offer you a chance at a championship now and a chance at being a lottery pick now. And the relationships, because that's always what we hear, the relationships go deeper than that. And I think VJ Edgecombe has developed a relationship, not just with Alvin Brooks, not just with John Jacobs, but with the program as a whole, with Scott Drew, with some of the other guys on the bench, with some of the other guys coming in. And I think for sure we will see VJ Edgecombe playing at Baylor next year. Kentucky will have plenty of other good players. So I know you won't, but don't shed a tear for them. I think they'll be okay. But VJ Edgecombe, you will be watching him playing for the Baylor Bears in late 2024 and into 2025, and it will be beautiful. Today's episode of Locked On Baylor is brought to you by FanDuel. Playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Boy, did we have some good ones over the weekend. And baseball's in full swing too. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. So bet on everything from slap shots, home runs, slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Today's episode is also brought to you by Gametime. You want to go see VJ Edgecombe play for the Bears next year? You want to do it in the Foster Pavilion? I do too. But don't get tricked by some of these other ticketing websites. I know y'all know what I'm talking about. You go in there, You don't have a great idea of even what you're buying. You don't know how good the value is. You're doubling your price when you look at fees. Not the case at Gametime. It's the best place and really the only place to go and buy tickets for everything that needs a ticket. Okay. Games, concerts, comedy shows, theater, all of that. When you go in, you see all in pricing. So that price that you see, that is the price you are going to pay. No hidden fees when it comes to that. You get to see the view from your seats, and you've got the lowest price guarantee. So if you go to another website and you find a ticket in your section, in your row, that is cheaper than Gametime, our pals are going to credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. And before we get you out of here, I did want to include one segment that I had with the great Drake Toll on Locked on Big 12 this week to talk about a former Bear, Joey McGuire, and conference expansion and how that could work in the Big 12. I think there's an interesting way to look at who is going to speak for the Big 12 and who is not.
Cam, Joey McGuire joins 365 Sports, says that realignment is not only not done, but by the end of next season, we could see major changes, specifically in the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10. I'm not sure if he strategically left out the ACC and where they could go in expansion, because it seems as though they can only
already wrote him off.
But that now having a Big 12 football coach who speaks, and kind of the way he said it was in promotion of the conference. We've heard Kyle Whittingham get on a microphone and say that, we don't know if we'll even be playing BYU in a couple years because of this. McGuire now talks about how where the Big 12 can go moving forward. That's something almost unprecedented in these conversations, an actual head coach saying, look out, it's coming.
Yeah, and I do like that. As much as I'm not I don't love expansion or anything. It's fine. It kind of is what it is. I think we're all in that spot where it's not going anywhere. But I do love that someone from the Big 12, that's not just the commissioner, or Drake Toll, is able to come out and say, you know what, we're here too. And yeah, we're going to keep expanding. We're not in a bad spot here. The ACC ain't in a great spot. Obviously, everyone only thinks of the Big Ten and the SEC, but we're here too. And we have a lot to offer in this conference. And I think that's, the way Joey McGuire kind of presented this, I think is a way to say that.
Do you find, my question, I guess, from off the rip of the head coach saying this, do you find it crass? Because you start the conversation. You started the answer with, I don't love the expansion thing, right? We're losing Oklahoma State. We're losing Texas Tech. And now he comes out in a positive way saying, hey, I mean, this stuff is going to keep happening. And maybe there's further hope for the Big 12. Is that a bad thing? Is that in poor taste?
No. And I think, for the Tech fans listening, and for those of us Baylor fans who remember Joey quite well, it wasn't that long ago, Joey is supremely positive. And so we're kind of wallowing in the mire of, boy, I am going to miss having Baylor versus Texas, or I miss OU coming into town. We are going to miss that. But Joey McGuire is kind of like, that's done, man. We tried the whole, pick the fight with Texas thing. It didn't work. And now we are we got to move forward, and there's a positive way we can go about this. We might not have all the great rivalries that you once had, but in 1996, Baylor and TCU fans were saying the same thing. Tech and Rice fans were thinking the same thing. Arkansas and Texas fans were thinking the same thing. And we move forward. We can only control what we can control. And in a way, this is me in my literary class here, reading between the lines of, don't count us out. Don't count out the Big 12 here. We still got plenty to offer. So yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing.
With you being so close to the envelope with Baylor, I know a lot of the reporters from different Locked On shows in the Big 12 are tight with their certain coaching staffs or at least in the loop. Is there a world in which a guy like Dave Aranda, much less a Joey McGuire, is invested in the expansion conversation? I mean, are the coaches in tune with where the Big 12 wants to go?
That's a good question, because that's what kind of struck me at first. Kind of that first answer of saying anyone but the commissioner saying this seems, or an athletic director, of course. not weird, but it is different. We haven't heard a lot of that because, especially in today's college football, where college football coaches are just saying, we just want to coach ball. We don't want to do the other stuff. We don't want to do the NIL. We don't want to do the fundraising. We don't want to, recruit our own players every year. And that certainly should mean, hey, we don't want to get involved in this expansion talk either. We just play the teams that are in front of us, and we are going to do what's best for our team. Steve Sarkisian shouldn't have had to been out there talking about why Texas is going to the SEC. So it is a little different to hear a coach doing it. And I think if Brett Yormark could have selected a coach to speak on this, it probably would be Joey McGuire because of, he's a very well-spoken man, very positive man, can get a lot of people behind him. I don't want to call him a preacher, but he can get a lot of people behind him. We have seen that time and time again. I don't see Dave Aranda getting involved in this discussion. I don't see a new guy like a Willie Fritz getting involved in this discussion. To be honest with you, I don't even see a Deion Sanders getting into this kind of discussion, other than, well, that's the best the Big 12's got, like he said last year. But, I would expect him to go out there and advocate for the conference and say, why don't we have some more teams here? Come in, we're having a good time. We can put together something good. So I don't expect a lot of coaches to get on board and start doing what Joey McGuire did. That said, if they do, that would mean this Joey McGuire thing is a success, and that would mean that is coming down from the offices of Brett Yormark.
And it feels like, I think you mentioned, Joey McGuire being the one to speak on this. I don't think he makes those comments if he doesn't actually feel that way. He has been very politically correct in front of the cameras and press conferences and whatnot. He's not controversial at all. Now, had Dana Holgerson come out or Kyle Whittingham and said, oh yeah, expansion's going to happen. It's like, oh, that's crazy. The crazy uncle did the thing where he does the crazy uncle thing again. But McGuire's not like that. He's in a different category. And I wonder if I'm reading too deep into his exclusion of the ACC. I think it wouldn't take an idiot to understand if the Big 12 wants to expand, it's going to have to go to the ACC. From a coach's perspective, do you get picky? Do you think these guys like a McGuire says, oh, wow, I really want to add Louisville, but I would hate to add Washington State from a travel standpoint? How much can your beggars be choosers?
It's an interesting part of this, right? They all have opinions for sure. Sure. Of course, I think that's a great example actually of Tech Washington State, because if you add someone out there, oh, well, Tech's out west, they can handle it. And it's kind of all well and good for football, but we've had this discussion before about expansion. It's also women's basketball. It's also tennis. It's also
cross country is one that always gets brought up.
Cross country, man. We got to protect these people. Who was that? It was the Missouri coach who was like, we can't have this. We can't have the cross country team traveling on a weeknight. And there is something to that. So they all have opinions, but I think a lot of the coaches in the conference would be pretty muted no matter what the decision is. They would say, oh, well, that's too bad. We like playing UT, but they're gone now, whatever. Tunnel vision. But specifically to the ACC thing, if the Big 12 is going to expand, there's no doubt where they're looking, right? There's no doubt that's what they're looking. This is kind of a wounded duck, and I know ACC fans hate that coming from Big 12 people, but it's true. This is an ACC that is hanging on by not a thread, but a couple of threads, I'd say.
Yeah, and now being sued by the Attorney General of Florida, Clemson, and Florida State. Those don't bode well for the Atlantic Coast Conference that wants to stay alive.
All right, that's all we got time for today. Let me know what you think about that. Who do you want in the conference expansion, and why is the Big 12 still a good place to go? Drop that down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about having Snaxx back in the rotation for that Baylor defensive backfield. Drop that in the comments. And of course, do you believe me? Do you think VJ Edgecombe is going to stay here at Baylor? Or are you not having any fun? Drop that down in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe, ring that notification bell so that we can bring that episode to you every time we drop it. It is on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making it your first listen today and every day. We'll be back tomorrow with more Locked On Baylor.